It all started on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the quiet suburban neighborhood. Birds chirped lazily, and the distant hum of lawnmowers was the only hint that life had begun to stir. I, like any responsible homeowner, was heading out to check on my property when I noticed something unusual. My usually pristine water tank, the one I had maintained meticulously for years, had an odd, hardened layer on top. At first, I thought it might be some kind of algae or debris, but nothing could have prepared me for the shocking truth. As I approached closer, the unmistakable smell of wet cement hit me. Confused, I touched the surface, and my fingers sank slightly into what was unmistakably hardened concrete. My heart pounded. Concrete, I muttered aloud, my mind racing. How could this happen? Why would someone pour concrete into my water tank? My first thought, naturally, went to the HOA. They had always been a bit overzealous with rules, but this was a whole new level of absurdity. Before I could gather my thoughts, my neighbor Mrs. Jenkins came rushing over, waving her arms frantically. Have you noticed there's no water? My shower didn't even turn on this morning, she exclaimed. At first, I assumed her plumbing had failed. But as I looked around, more neighbors appeared, their faces etched with confusion and frustration. Fountains were dry, sprinklers idle, and toilets sat unused. Panic started to ripple through the neighborhood. It didn't take long for the horrifying realization to sink in. The tank I thought belonged solely to me wasn't just a private water source, it was the main supply for the entire neighborhood. My heart sank further as I imagined the consequences. Families without water, children unable to play in sprinklers, elderly residents struggling to maintain basic hygiene. And all of it caused by a seemingly petty decision from the HOA, who probably thought they were just teaching me a lesson, or enforcing some obscure rule. I immediately called the HOA office, trying to remain calm. Hello, a bored receptionist answered. I explained the situation, my voice rising with each sentence. She paused. I'm not sure what you mean, she said, clearly unprepared for the severity of the situation. I requested to speak with the board members directly, and after what felt like an eternity, I was connected to Mr. Thompson, the HOA president. Mr. Thompson, you need to come look at this immediately. The water tank is full of concrete, I said, trying to keep my panic in check. There was silence on the other end. Finally, he muttered something about property violations, and promised he would send someone over. But I could tell by his tone that he had no idea of the scale of the problem. By the time the HOA representatives arrived, a crowd of frustrated neighbors had gathered. I explained the situation, showing them the thick, unyielding layer of concrete in the tank. Their expressions shifted from mild annoyance to absolute horror as they realized that their actions had inadvertently cut off water to dozens of homes. Mr. Thompson tried to defend the decision, citing rules and regulations, but it was clear that the reality of what they had done was sinking in. The next few hours were a whirlwind. Emergency repair crews were called in, armed with heavy machinery and specialized tools. Jackhammers, cranes, and mixers arrived as neighbors looked on in anxious anticipation. Watching the concrete being chipped away, the sense of disbelief lingered. How could something so careless have such massive repercussions? During the chaos, neighbors began sharing their stories of what the water outage had caused. Some had missed work because they couldn't shower, others had pets suffering from thirst. Children complained of not being able to play outside, and elderly residents fretted over the inability to clean their homes properly. The HOA members, now fully aware of their blunder, stood silently, unable to offer a satisfactory explanation or apology. As the day wore on, I realized that this incident had become more than just a personal grievance, it was a lesson in accountability and responsibility. The HOA, in their overzealous enforcement, had not considered the broader impact of their actions. What they thought was a small disciplinary measure had escalated into a community-wide crisis. And as I watched the first gushes of water flow from the repaired tank, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and lingering frustration. By evening, the neighborhood had regained its water supply, but the incident left an indelible mark. Conversations about HOA accountability, oversight, and transparency dominated discussions for weeks afterward. While the physical damage was repaired quickly, the trust between residents and the HOA took much longer to rebuild. In the end, this experience taught everyone involved a crucial lesson: small actions, when made without full understanding, can have far-reaching consequences. And as for me, I had learned to never underestimate the sheer impact of what seemed like a minor dispute with the HOA. One concrete pour, intended as a petty enforcement, had reminded an entire neighborhood just how interconnected we all were, and how fragile our systems could be when overlooked. After the chaos of discovering the concrete-filled water tank, I thought the nightmare was over. The emergency crews had finally cleared the blockage, and water was once again flowing into the neighborhood. Yet, as I looked around at my neighbors celebrating the restored supply, I realized the real battle had only just begun. The HOA, in their arrogant and careless attempt to assert control, had severely underestimated the consequences of their actions, and now they were about to face the full weight of community outrage. I knew I couldn't stay silent. The incident wasn't just a personal grievance, it had affected dozens of families, elderly residents, and children who depended on that water. Their frustration and anger deserved acknowledgement, and the HOA had to be held accountable. I decided to document everything: photos of the concrete-filled tank, video of emergency crews arriving, statements from neighbors who had suffered due to the water outage. Every detail mattered. The next morning, I posted a detailed account on the neighborhood online forum, outlining the sequence of events. I described how the HOA had filled the tank with concrete without understanding its purpose, the immediate water shortage that impacted the entire community, and the frantic efforts of residents and repair crews to restore normalcy. Within hours, my post had gone viral among the residents. Comments poured in, angry, incredulous, and full of frustration. Many people admitted they had initially trusted the HOA to act responsibly, but now their faith was shattered. As the momentum built, neighbors began organizing. A community meeting was scheduled at the local community center, and the turnout was massive. Dozens of residents, armed with questions, complaints, and evidence of the disruption caused, confronted the HOA board. Mr. Thompson and his team appeared pale and uneasy, suddenly aware that their small, disciplinary action had exploded into a public relations disaster. The meeting quickly turned heated. Voices were raised, emotions ran high, and long-held frustrations spilled out. I watched as families recounted their experiences, how they had gone days without adequate water, how their children were affected, and how vulnerable neighbors had struggled. The HOA board tried to justify their actions with regulations and obscure clauses, but the sheer scale of their error rendered their arguments meaningless. During the meeting, I took the floor to present my evidence. Photos of the tank, video footage of the repair crew removing concrete, and testimonials from affected neighbors painted a clear picture. The HOA board attempted to interrupt, but the room collectively refused to let them speak over the voices of the community. By the end of my presentation, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. What had begun as a routine complaint had become a reckoning. The repercussions were swift. Local authorities and media outlets caught wind of the incident. Stories about the concrete-filled water tank, the community-wide disruption, and the HOA's recklessness began circulating online and in local newspapers. Public opinion quickly turned against the HOA, and residents demanded accountability. Legal advisors contacted the board, warning them of potential lawsuits for negligence and property damage. The financial and reputational stakes were suddenly enormous. The HOA, once confident in their authority, now faced humiliation and real consequences. They were forced to issue a formal apology, though most residents found it inadequate. The repair costs were partially reimbursed, and additional measures were implemented to ensure such an incident could never happen again. I continued to advocate for stronger oversight, insisting on transparency and checks to prevent abuse of power. Throughout this ordeal, I realized that exposing wrongdoing wasn't just about seeking personal vindication, it was about protecting the community. Had I stayed silent, the HOA might have repeated similar actions, unaware or unconcerned about the wider consequences. By standing up, I not only safeguarded the neighborhood's resources but also inspired others to demand accountability from those in positions of authority. Months later, the incident had become a cautionary tale in the neighborhood. Residents were more engaged in HOA decisions, transparency measures were established, and the board had learned, the hard way, that reckless actions carry severe consequences. For me, it was a bittersweet victory. While I had succeeded in holding the HOA accountable, the ordeal had left scars on the community's trust and on my own sense of security. Yet, looking back, I recognized a silver lining. The incident had galvanized the neighborhood, teaching everyone that collective vigilance and proactive action are essential in protecting shared resources. What started as a concrete-filled water tank had evolved into a story of empowerment, resilience, and the importance of standing up against reckless authority. In the end, the HOA learned a valuable lesson about responsibility, oversight, and humility. And for the neighborhood, the incident became a symbol of unity, a reminder that no single person or organization should have unchecked power over the lives and well-being of an entire community. I had turned a moment of crisis into a catalyst for change, proving that accountability, transparency, and courage can prevail even in the face of careless authority.